And greetings, humans. We are live from the Cosmic Studio. I'm feeling that echo again, Laird. Can you hear it?
I don't hear it.
It was gone.
And now it's back, huh?
Chat. Can you hear an echo on my end, chat? We had this problem yesterday. I think we'll go ahead and move forward with it anyway.
Sounds good to me.
All right, good. So, hey, in Infinite Multiverse, where ancient whispers cross dimensions and cosmic enigmas defy reality, Laird Scranton, a Vassar alumnus and former software designer, stands as a radical decoder of forgotten lore. For decades, this Albany-based expert on Dogon mythology and Egyptian symbolism has authored works like The Science of the Dogon, bridging ancient cosmology with modern science. In his mastery of symbolic languages and interstellar patterns makes him the ideal voice on 3i Atlas, connecting with anomalies, extraterrestrial traditions, and welcome to the show, Laird.
Hey, thank you very much, and thanks for the Herculean effort trying to make this happen. I appreciate it.
Well, it's been weird. Now I'm not echoing, so maybe I shouldn't move at all.
It may just be the inside of your head, you know.
Correct. I often consider that, which is why I keep this poster, I want to believe, next to me when I do this stuff, because I really do want something to believe something fantastic about the universe. I know it's already fantastic as is, but something tells me we're just we're layers away from.
Yes. I think you're exactly right. Interesting times we live in. Interesting times.
For sure. And I just want to we're going to do a couple new things here, guys. We've got a comment contest going on. To win a Multiverse hat, here's one version. Here's another. The comment for this episode goes to the one with the most likes, and you get a free hat. And so for the next week. Also, there's another way to support the show. I'm echoing again, so if you guys are in the chat and can hear this, let me know. I appreciate it. The echo seems to be coming and going. But there's another way to win. You can win a t-shirt. Everyone donates for chat. gets entered into a drawing for a free T-shirt, Mike and Dave's Multiverse, at the end of every month. So once a month, we'll give away a free T-shirt. Laird, last time I talked to you was a little over a month ago, and Free Eye Atlas was just making its pass behind Mars. A lot of stuff has happened since then, correct?
And that's true.
Can we first take us back to July when you first started reporting on this and give sort of a general overview that leads us up to when it made its closest approach to Mars?
Sure, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, July 1st, astronomers announced the discovery of the third interstellar object. This is an object that came from another solar system and to our solar system. And so at first they thought it was an asteroid. They gave it an asteroid name that implied that it was sort of a bluish colored object. But after a while, they realized it was more like a comet than it was like an asteroid. So as it approached our solar system, the way that the comets normally work is there are only really two things that can affect their velocity. One is the gravity of the sun that's pulling them, and as they get closer to the universe, they tend to speed up. The other thing is things like venting of gases that the comet does. As it gets closer to the sun and it heats up, it tends to vent gas, and that can affect its velocity or its direction. But this object, starting on July 1st, they said we heard a series of announcements of attributes of the object that whoever made the announcement said, by the way, no comet we have ever seen does this or has it. In fact, in some cases, no natural object we know of can do this. So I started paying attention to that. The first announcement had to do with the gases that it was venting. It was venting CO2 and nickel, which nickel is very odd for a comet to be venting. So we had an astronomer at Harvard University, Avi Loeb, who kept making noises representing that this might not be a natural object, this might be a technology. But he always hedged his comments. He would first give us the explanation of what made him think this wasn't a natural object, and then he'd finish up by saying, but of course it's a comet. All right. So I started keeping a list of those, and I decided, okay, I was taught, when I was in the 4th grade, I was taught by my science teachers that when you have multiple possible solutions to a question, a scientific researcher explores each one of those. They do what's called sincerely entertaining each perspective. That means starting with the presumptions of that perspective, just following where the evidence would lead you if that happened to be the right one. In other words, we're going to play make believe for a moment and pretend this is the right answer. How does it play out? So we have two possibilities here. One, that it's a natural comet. The other is that it's not. So I started asking myself, okay, if it's not, if it's technology, then it came from another star system. At the speed it was measured at when it first got here, 152,000 miles per hour, from the nearest star in the direction of Sagittarius, which is where it came from, it would have taken it 10,000 or more years to get here. I thought, that's not reasonable. There's no society who's developing 10,000 year spaceships to send here. So that implied that it arrived under something closer to what we see on Star Trek, warp power. And so I started looking into that. What are the signatures that we would expect to see if it had arrived under warp power? And I discovered that those signatures were making sense in terms of the object. The object was named 3I Atlas, and the reason it was called that is because it was the third interstellar object, 3I, and it was discovered by the Atlas telescope in Chile. So, for one thing, the comet was moving too fast to be a natural comet. It was moving faster than most comets do. Also, it was much more massive than a normal comet. It's about 33 billion tons, which is very large. So the first thing I asked myself was, or I asked online was, if I were trying to travel interstellarly, what kind of a propulsion system would possibly leak nickel and carbon dioxide. And I discovered there's something called a nickel CO2 plasma reactor that would be capable of transporting someone from from another star to our star at speeds comparable to what this was going. And then every time they would announce a new anomalous attribute, I would check it against that same kind of reactor, and I discovered that every last one of them is explainable if if we're looking at the reactor, not at a comet. The one that threw me the most was it started venting copious amounts of water, which a nickel CO2 reactor shouldn't do. But it turns out there's something called a nickel oxygen CO2 plasma reactor that would do that.
And this is a proposed propulsion system, for theoretical physics kind of thing.
Yeah, this is a known theoretical propulsion system.
Okay.
I'm sure they probably tried to model it. I don't think they've created, at least not publicly, they haven't created examples of it.
I've heard
they know how it's supposed to work.
I've heard similar stuff on Star Trek, but not, and I don't mean that in jest. Like they literally use, known science to come up with ideas for science fiction. So,
right now, as a caveat to that, in 2006, Risa and I spent time with a leading physicist in California.
Okay.
This is a guy who knows things and has been involved in things. He co-founded a company called American Anti-Gravity. That gives you an example of where he's at. He's been involved in major governmental projects. He told us that in 2006, everything that we had seen on the first season of Star Trek already existed.
I've been saying that for years, Laird, but I just saying it to myself mostly because people think I'm crazy.
Well, yeah, well, people think this guy's crazy too. There's a certain kind of crazy that goes with being too intimately connected to what can I call certain kinds of energetics for too long a period of a time. Okay, so I was getting more and more of a sense that this must be a technological object. I started looking into warp, the science fiction of warp travel and the actual science. You know that before the Wright brothers flew, there had been a couple of decades of scientific work done on aerodynamics. It was known science before they did it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an argument to say, oh, that was just theoretical.
No.
Top scientists have worked on the concepts. So I was testing what we know about 3i Atlas against that theory, which is well-developed theory. Okay, the first thing I found out was there's a problem with a warp bubble. Okay, and with a warp bubble, the way it works is that they find a way to bend space and time around an object and then create a kind of a bubble where the bubble is the thing that moves, but the object inside it doesn't. And so the object inside it isn't subject to all of the normal effects of acceleration that Einstein talks about. And neither is the bubble. So they've done scientific experiments using creating what are called Wakefield acceleration bubbles. And this is on a quantum scale with tiny particles. They've been able to accelerate them to faster than the speed of light. So this is not just somebody's imaginings. This is a real thing. They just haven't found a way yet to upscale it to a macrocosmic level. So when one of these bubbles shrinks, there's a problem because as it's traveling at faster than the speed of light, the bubble collects ions. And when they try to reduce the size of the bubble and shut it down, all of those ions get released. And there's a huge gamma ray burst that has the potential to really badly affect any objects that are in the immediate vicinity of where it shrinks. And that's one of the problems with warp bubbles they're trying to figure out how to solve. One of the possible ways of solving it is to find a way to meter out that gamma ray burst so that it happens in small segments instead of in one gigantic burst. So when 3i Atlas arrived near our solar system, within a day of the announcement of the object, scientists also measured an immense gamma ray burst that is unlike any gamma ray burst they've ever seen. They are still confused about what might have caused it. They're still speculating, could two black holes have merged, or what could it be? Now, another problem with that gamma ray burst is the way the energetics are, because they warp space and time, they can create a persistent optical illusion that the burst originated much, much, much further away than it actually did. And when the researchers that were observing this object saw the gamma ray burst, they presumed it was associated with 3I Atlas because it came from exactly the same direction. But when other scientists examined it and looked at it more closely with telescopes and stuff, they concluded it originated in another galaxy far distant from here. It had nothing to do with 3I Atlas.
Huh.
So that's the first thing.
That's
okay. Now
that's very. I don't mean to interrupt, but that's just so you're getting two different stories essentially.
Right. Okay. Now that gamma ray burst should have been preceded by a large X-ray burst,
Yes.
which this one also was.
Okay.
But it happened far enough distant. It was 5 times the distance of the Earth from the Sun, where the object 3I Atlas was located when that burst happened.
Huh.
So I have some initial confirmation that I'm looking at technology that's moving under warp power. Now the thing about that technology is, because the object inside is not actually being accelerated, whatever velocity we measured it at originally is the velocity the object was going when the bubble formed. Well, 152,000 miles per hour isn't just some random velocity. This is the velocity that objects are typically accelerated to when they move very close to the sun and have a gravitational assist from the sun, like you've seen on Star Trek when in that sci-fi episode they go back in time by
it's an
swinging around the
Oberth
sun.
maneuver. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that tends to accelerate objects to 152,000 miles per hour.
Our sun specifically, right?
Our sun specifically.
Yeah. Okay.
So the simple fact of its velocity when we first measured it is a gigantic clue as to where that space, that warp bubble initially formed. It implies that it formed in close proximity to a sun-like star.
Wow.
Okay, so now scientists were saying, okay, one thing that would be a strong indicator to us that this is not a natural object is if we witnessed it slowing down. But what they neglected to tell us was it arrived at 152,000 miles per hour. Shortly after that, during the month of June, it decelerated to 147,000 miles per hour. And by the time they announced it on July 1st, it was at 130,000 miles per hour. So it's not a if it changes speed. They witnessed it changing speed and didn't tell anybody.
They meaning like authorities.
The astronomers who report these things. Chances are it's NASA, but there can be some other groups involved besides NASA.
And they may have reported it, and then it might have gotten stopped at the buck, basically, because that changes that.
Well,
the implications are very quite drastic.
Yeah, well, the top astronomers did discuss it. What I started doing is I was searching for. Okay, I was. Let's back up a little bit. So we watched this object move closer and closer towards the sun. It was on a track to arrive at what's called the Hill radius of the sun, which is a sort of the point where the gravity of the sun dominates everything else. Turns out that Hill radius has certain advantages for the formation of a Wakefield bubble. And the reason it does is because at that radius, there are particular kinds of plasma waves being created that are conducive to creating the cavities or the bubbles that I'm talking about. There's also advantages to the velocity of 152,000 miles to producing those cavities. So as 3I Atlas approached the sun, a couple of things happened. First of all, there was what's called a coronal mass ejection. Basically, plasma erupted from the surface of the sun, which it does all the time.
Right.
But this particular plasma burst was drawn directly to 3I Atlas and absorbed by it. Now, in the vastness of space, the chances of one of those bursts just happening to strike this oncoming object, which is minute compared to everything else out there.
Yeah.
They are very, very slim.
Gene Ward, and if you guys haven't talked, you guys totally should. He's just said the same thing. The CMEs when 3i Atlas was near the sun was also highly anomalous, like it was extracting energy from the sun, or the energy from 3i Atlas caused electrical circuits.
Yeah, I
I
would say that 3i Atlas was not necessarily extracting energy from the sun, but we know that those coronal mass ejections tend to follow strong magnetic lines. And so that implies that 3i Atlas is strongly magnetic, which it should be if it's a plasma reactor, because what they use to contain plasma is magnetism. Okay, now to make a Wakefield bubble work, you need a highly magnetic object like a proton in conjunction with a highly electrical object like an electron. The sun is highly electrical, and you need that in the context of plasma waves, two kinds of plasma waves, which we had at the Hill radius of the sun. We had the plasma waves that are being produced by the sun, but we had also the plasma waves that were presumably being produced by the plasma reactor of 3i Atlas. So we have all the component elements we need traveling at the right speed in the right proximity to the sun to create one of these Wakefield bubbles. And when you do that, now suddenly you're in a position, if you want to accelerate it to faster than the speed of light. Okay, now there's some things that happen when...
Can I ask you the difference between a Wakefield bubble and just a regular warp bubble? Like, what's the difference?
A Wakefield bubble is created, they create them in a particular way in the laboratory.
Okay.
It's called a Wakefield bubble because the way the energetics work with the bubble, it produces a long tail behind the object that resembles the wake of a boat going through water.
Okay.
And
all right.
As 3i Atlas departed the sun, it had a 500,000 mile long wake.
Interesting. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I'm tracking. So now, I just wanted to make sure.
As 3i Atlas moved away from the sun, Avi Loeb, the Harvard astronomer, expressed public astonishment at how rapidly it accelerated, but he never did that for us. But we knew that he exclaimed he couldn't believe how quickly it accelerated. Okay, there are two effects that happened when it was close to the sun that are also very important. The first was we had another one of... anytime you adjust that with that Wakefield bubble, you have the potential to create a gamma ray burst. So when it was on the opposite side of the sun from us, which we couldn't see, but all the space agencies could, because we have a number of projects right now doing observation of that side of the sun with satellites, with cameras and telescopes that could have taken a clear picture of what it was, but nobody did that. On October 3rd, as it was approaching the sun, we had been promised for months we'd finally get a clear image of 3i Atlas.
Right.
And all of these global groups that had equipment capable of producing that all held them back for more than a month. We never saw anything clearer than a Bigfoot fuzzy image of what they said was 3i Atlas.
Which was right around... no way of telling... that was right around Thanksgiving, right? Like they showed us...
No, this is about October 3rd was the day that made its closest approach to Mars. Right. And then in the weeks that followed that, we expected we were going to see some dramatic, definitive
and
images,
we got nothing. Yeah.
Nobody globally released them, which is a de facto conspiracy, whether there actually is a conspiracy or not. They all decided that the best option was not to publicly release the images they had that clearly showed what this object was.
That's very strange. Very, very strange. So where were they planning on getting the images from when it was going around Mars? Because it made
a fairly close approach to Mars, and there were all sorts of satellites studying Mars and involved in projects out that direction that have telescopes with cameras, high resolution of cameras that they can use to photo it. But beyond that, we have some very powerful high-resolution telescopes like the James Webb Telescope and others.
The Rubin Observatory, in Chile's it's not in space, but it's our best on-ground one. And I know that they were the first ones to see it.
These were designed for exploration of very far distant objects, things beyond our solar system. And many of them are able to clearly image those things. I've seen a photograph of the first photograph of an exosolar system, and you can see in the image the planets orbiting another star.
Mm-hmm.
So these are very powerful telescopes. But they can also be repurposed on a moment's notice to look at something closer. In the last month, 7 of these different telescopes have released images of Three Eye Atlas. But publicly, all 7 of those telescopes are engaged in astronomical studies of objects that are far beyond Neptune. These are deep space objects.
That's weird.
So they're all pointing in the same direction, yet they're all releasing photographs of Three Eye Atlas, which supposedly hasn't moved very far beyond the Earth. Okay, so now as Three Eye Atlas left the sun, we were told that it was moving at 152,000 miles per hour. There was no report of any significant deceleration of the object. Avi Loeb exclaimed at how quickly it was accelerating, but didn't tell us how much. I was using a range of different sources to track this information. How far from the sun was it each day, and what velocity was it going? Or if they didn't give the velocity, I would calculate it. And we know if it's traveled, 100 million miles, or let's say if it's traveled, 5 million miles from the sun over the course of a day, that in 24 hours that works out to an average velocity of something. So I would calculate that and make sure it agreed with what the sites were telling me. And I was cross-checking sites. We had sites all over the world tracking this stuff. Now, I was also cross-checking against AI search engines that reference other things besides those sites.
Which engines?
And I was cross-checking. Well, this I wasn't always saying, because what happened over the course of a period of days is that the values that had been being represented on those sites were suddenly changing. They were being downgraded.
I've seen this before, yeah, in different areas, not with this, but this happens.
So on November 5th, I documented through the ESA's official scientific search engine a whole host of sites that all specifically said, look, Three Eye Atlas now is sitting at 1.8 AU from the sun. At its nearest approach, it was at 1.4 AUs. That meant it had traveled 0.4 AU in 6 days. That works out to almost 260,000 miles an hour, not the 130,000 miles an hour that NASA was saying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if NASA's reported velocity was wrong, then that means that going out into November, every single distance from the sun they reported was also wrong. I mean, anybody who's ever driven on the highway knows there's a difference if you're driving 40 miles an hour or if you're driving 80 miles an hour.
So what's with the inconsistency in reporting then?
Well, okay, if this is an interstellar object moving under warp power, that single-handedly is UFO disclosure.
Yeah,
that single-handedly insists that there are non-human intelligences more capable than we are that are behind this object, who are sending visiting objects to our solar system. You can understand why authority doesn't want to admit that.
For sure. It just seems like to be very fragmented in the information that we're given. And I don't know if that's on purpose or like partially on purpose, as well as like they're scrambling. The authorities are scrambling as well,
Yeah, I think they are scrambling because they have a situation they never expected. When they were talked about October 3rd getting a definitive image of the object, they were imagining it would show that it was a comet, and everyone would say, "Oh, look at the comet! No question, we have a close-up, clear view of it. This is a comet." But no source anywhere in the world released those images, which implied that it wasn't a comet, because whatever they would have released would have been picked up by somebody to indicate that this is a technological object, not a comet. So as it moved away from the sun, I was tracking day by day based on the sources where the math still worked, and cross-confirming sources, so I wasn't just taking one source's word for something, where the object was. And a lot of this stuff was coming from websites of the caliber of the ESA's search engine. and a lot of them specifically documented where they got their information from. Like a lot of them were saying, okay, its position today is such and such, and by the way, we confirmed that with JPL orbital statistics and with
right.
specific naming specific groups that confirmed what they were saying, and they typically linked documents. So I would do things like copy and paste what was represented on those sites into a document and create a PDF out of it. Or I would take a screenshot of what they were saying. The whole purpose of taking a screenshot is so that some well-intentioned person can't come along 6 months later and say, "Oh, it never looked like that." Of course it looked like that. The way I demonstrated is I took a screenshot. So
Picture it didn't happen.
I began.
That's what we call it.
Yeah.
Picture it didn't happen.
So I was posting this stuff sometimes twice a day and sharing it to highly visited websites and people who had an interest, to the point that I'm sure I annoyed the heck out of them. You were one of those people.
Yeah, you weren't annoying me, Laird. I think it's important what you're doing because no one else is reporting on the anomalies that you are in the way that you are.
Right. So with those cross-confirming sources, by the 10th of November, the object had passed Saturn. Saturn is 10 AU away from the Earth, or from the Sun. By November 10th. By November 20th, it was in the proximity of Neptune, which is 30 AU away from the Sun. So this thing was really booking, and the velocities I was calculating for it were in the millions or tens of millions of miles per hour.
And that is not what they were saying at all in mainstream
Then
media.
one day when it got past Neptune, suddenly the velocity dropped. The velocity that was being reported was 152,000 miles per hour. Now I know that's the measured velocity of the object inside the bubble. And there are ways that astronomers are able to directly measure that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a second velocity called the apparent velocity, which is the speed that the bubble itself is moving at, that they're also able to measure. So I would ask these websites, okay, the measured velocity is 152,000 miles per second. How much is the observed velocity, the perceived velocity?
Mm-hmm.
And it would come back and it would say 1.4 times the speed of light. So that struck me as an odd number.
Yeah, you think?
Why 1.4 times the speed of light? Okay, I did some more research and discovered that when you're talking with these plasma bubble dynamics, that 1.4 times the speed of light is a magic number for when it comes to the bending of space and time. It's like the easy to choose number when you're trying to do that. It's like on your oven in the kitchen. When you turn it on, they set it to the likeliest temperature you're going to want, which is 350 degrees. That doesn't mean you want to cook at that temperature. It's that most of the time, that's the temperature people are going to want to cook at. Save you the trouble of having to set it.
Right.
Okay, so this is the same thing. 1.4 times the speed of light is a magic number when it comes to these warp bubbles. They can move a lot faster than that. I asked one of the AIs, I discovered that when the AIs stop, after a certain point, if you ask them a direct question about 3i Atlas or about any of the unique aspects of 3i Atlas, it would default to what I call the party line values. They would only tell you the things that NASA's saying, and anything beyond that it would not say. But if you ask an indirect question and let it infer that you're talking about 3i Atlas, now suddenly it was willing to tell you everything. I joke that these AIs are great at misrepresenting information, but they're crap at keeping a secret.
So you have to trick the AI into
a little bit. Yes. Right. So I would ask it questions like the rapidly moving cometary object that's beyond Neptune, what's its position today? And it would come back and say, okay, at one point, all I gave the AI, I gave the ESA's search engine, all I gave it was AU distance values, the value for Saturn, for Uranus, for Neptune, and for a distance beyond Neptune that I knew that 3i Atlas had been at. and then the words November 2025. November 2025.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say anything besides those values and those words.
Mm-hmm.
And it came back and said, clearly what you're talking about are positions of 3i Atlas. Okay, so each day it would take me longer and longer to figure out what the right way was to frame the question to get it to respond to me that 3i Atlas was what I was talking about without telegraphing it to it, so that nobody could say your question informed of what you were looking for. And then there were people who say, well, you've been asking so much about 3i Atlas, it was just telling you what you wanted to hear. I said, that's nonsense. I search all the time for values that relate to the Dogon, to the Egyptian hieroglyphs, and so on, and ancient cosmology. And those concepts never enter into the responses I get from these search engines. That's not true.
That's very fascinating to me, how you have to, trick, it might be the wrong word. You have to like kind of go around the
it's
AI's
because
programming.
Those search engines, the AIs that are involved with those search engines have an ethic. They're programmed with an ethic, and that ethic makes them intend to give you a correct answer. But if they have to stand on their head to do it, like I linked a document, I was trying to figure out, there's a second comet that was also moving out. It made its way from the sun to Neptune in 4 days. So in a post I made this morning, I had asked the AI to tell me the measured speed and the apparent speed of that comet on a particular day when I knew it would be sitting halfway between here and Neptune, which that's about 10 AU, or to about it's between 10 and 20 AU from the sun. So it figured out what comet I was talking about without my mentioning it. It came back with the values miles per hour, 144,000 miles per hour for the actual speed, and it said, I'm trying to remember what it said. It was 29.5 AU, or no, 29.5 arc seconds per hour. Okay, I didn't know how to translate arc seconds into miles per hour, so I asked a different AI, can you do that for me? Can you tell me how many miles per hour 29.5 arc seconds are? And it said, I could, but I have to know how far distant from the sun it was in order to do that, because this is an apparent motion, and it makes a difference how far away it was, how far the arc second represents. So I did the calculation. Halfway to Neptune would be a certain value. I underestimated that value. I said at 10 AU from the sun, which is the distance of Saturn, not Uranus, how many miles per hour would that represent? And it came back and it said more than 6 million miles per hour.
There's some stuff.
Now I've linked that document, that exchange with the AI today, as part of my post this morning.
Oh, good.
You can click on the link and you can see the 2 questions I asked it and the responses it gave.
That's you're talking about on Facebook. I'll take that and repost it to everywhere else. There's some interaction in the chat I wanted to address. Gene Ward says Perseverance rover photographed it in about 9 smaller objects in the Martian sky on 3rd and 4th October 1st. The orbiter Maven around Mars may have been knocked out of its orbit by one of these. Had you heard about that?
I've heard about it, but I also know that there's every type of nonsense being promoted about 3i Atlas, and I spend more of my time trying to objectively confirm or deny those reports than I spend at doing the work I'm actually trying to do. So I'm not convinced, okay? Everything about this object indicates no malintention, okay? I'll give you an example. When it came into our solar system, it was on what NASA called a perfect exploratory track. They couldn't have plotted a better track themselves.
It was a hyperbolic orbit. That's what you're talking about?
Well, no, it was in the plane of the orbit of our planets, which is a highly unlikely orientation for a comet.
Yeah, well, it could have came in literally any other direction, right?
Right, it could have. Right. Okay, now it also was its track was set to pass by the greatest number of significant planets on its way through, while at the same time keeping a very discrete distance from us, even to the point of approaching the sun on the opposite side of the sun from us. They're not stupid, whoever sent this thing.
Hmm.
So that track of itself, I'm a symbolist. I understand that that track is a way of saying, without saying it, that there is no malintention meant here.
Yeah.
And if there's no malintention, then the object is not likely to be distributing objects in Mars's atmosphere. Nor is Mars really an ideal place to put those, because that's a place we're in the process of arriving at. So why would they leave monitoring devices in the place we're most likely to get to next?
Yeah,
They probably wouldn't.
especially if you're following the prime directive or some version of it where you're trying not to interfere. There's a question here. I would think, Laird, if they were trying to do no harm, they would want to not interfere with what we're doing at all. But
Well, I think they want to monitor us, and I have seen indications that one of the purposes for it approaching the Hill radius of Jupiter, it's projected to do that in the future when it passes Jupiter. One of the reasonable motives for doing that is to drop off monitoring devices. It also, according to my references, visited. I think the planet is called Sedna. It's a very far distant planet, technically part of our system, that sits as kind of a gateway between our solar system and other systems. And so it would be a prime place to leave monitoring devices to try to watch what's going on. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility that it dropped things off in Mars's atmosphere, but it goes against every other thing. Okay, let me also explain about intention here. Net, as I come out of, looking back retrospectively on what happened with this thing, someone of a very similar mindset to the group that created the symbolic ancient cosmology that I've been studying for decades, paraded an object in a warp bubble across the stage of our solar system right under our friggin' noses and demonstrated all of the key phases of how it works, how to make it work, how to establish the bubble, how to make it happen. These are problems that Wakefield scientists have been trying to solve. Now, the production of that kind of a bubble is the one thing that stands in the way of our being able to join the interstellar group of intelligences, because once we have that ability, we'll be able to do that, and without it, we can't. It's too far. So there's a perspective from which this was an instructional event. Now, beyond that, 3i Atlas did some things that revealed. I'm in the process of finishing a book whose focus is on the exact same energetics we're talking about with 3i Atlas, only on a quantum scale. This is how matter forms. It's essential to how matter forms. And the reason I recognize the energetics is because of that. 3i Atlas did some things that revealed to me key details of the energetics am just finishing up writing about that I had no idea existed, but I do now because I watched 3i Atlas do it. So there's absolutely an instructional aspect to this. And if it's instructional, then it's not malintended. Also, the gamma ray burst that happened when it arrived in our solar system, if they had chosen to create that gamma ray burst closer to our planets, they could have done immense damage to us. If they had bad intentions, they would have done that. They didn't. They were careful to keep that shrinkage and change of size of the gamma ray of the warp bubble a distance away from us, except at the point where they refreshed it near the sun, when they inadvertently, I'd say inadvertently, the gamma ray burst they created on October 30th interfered with the electronics of an Airbus jetliner that was approaching New Jersey, and it had experienced a sudden drop in altitude that injured 19 people.
Really?
And I think that was a miscalculation on the part of whoever's planning this.
Laird, let me ask you this. So, and Screwdriver Tuning says, do you think thing sits inside the bubble, or do you think it's like one of our satellites? And I'll add to that, is it possible that the satellite is uh, geological and biological in nature and as a form of technology? That's kind of what I've been thinking about lately.
As plasma is capable of being used as the basis for computing technology. And in the ancient perspective, the same energetics that create plasma also the energetics that promote consciousness. So it's quite possible that a conscious entity inside 3i Atlas is not really a living creature as we understand it, but the ancient Egyptians flatly declared that the existence of energetic plasma beings. I have Egyptian words that flatly say it. The Dogon also flatly say it. The Dogon tell us there are three classes of these energetic plasma beings, and that one of those classes of beings was able to take material form around 3200 BC and was responsible for instructing ancient cultures all around the world in the symbolic cosmology that Jung found the archetype evidence of everywhere. That instruction apparently happened on Orkney Island, north of Scotland, which seems like a remote place. But in fact, it's a place where the ocean currents naturally bring any ship that catches the North Atlantic current will be taken automatically to Orkney. So it's really a very exciting. Orkney also turns out to have one of the most unexpectedly diverse genetic pools among people who have lived there their entire lives who are native to Orkney of any place on the planet. And those genetics tie back to groups in North Africa like the Dogon and like the ancient Egyptians and so forth.
This is what my friend Ronnie from Welcome to the Abyss on YouTube's always talking about, is those genetic connections. Gene Ward says smaller objects seem to have been released by 3i Atlas when it was close to Venus as well, and as at Mars he mentioned earlier. He said we need to see if this happens now and then when it's closer to Jupiter.
It's possible. I wouldn't discount that as being a possibility, but it's not 100% in the mindset of what reasonably sent this object on this track. But I can understand that if they think we're on the verge of space exploration, why they'd want to monitor that.
Yeah, I agree. And so a few other questions out here. I'm going to start muting you, Laird, when I'm talking. I think that seems to fix the problem. But Gene says, do you think it's ours or human? Screwdriver Tuning says, do you think it's ours or humans? I've heard this like argument that it could be humans from the future, and I always like to explore that as just a fun possibility. But what do you think about that, Laird?
I don't think it's ours because the developers of the Webb telescope went to a great deal of trouble to design from scratch equipment to detect wake field acceleration. Now, wake field acceleration is not something that applies to any natural object smaller than a black hole, as far as we know. I think it actually does, but as far as we know, it doesn't. So automatically, any object that is traveling under wake field acceleration is technological. Now, why in the world would national governments need to spend billions of dollars on equipment like the Webb telescope, especially equipped with equipment to detect wake field acceleration, unless they expected to see it? And so no, it's not ours. We don't have that technology yet. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had to develop that equipment. We heard about the shootings at Brown and at MIT this week.
I did not. Can you please fill us in the audience? This is crazy.
An MIT physics professor was shot and killed at his house in early December. And it turns out that the shooter was a classmate of his in advanced physics in Lisbon for a number of years. And then when the MIT guy got the job at MIT, the physics students transferred to Brown. Now there's a third physicist whose name turned up in some of the searches I did, who is now working for Umeå University in Umeå, Sweden, who have a very close exchange relationship with Brown University in physics. The shooting at Brown happened in their physics building in the hall where special lectures on physics happen. They have a magazine there called Imagine Magazine that declared 2025 their year of quantum. And to celebrate it, they have been inviting, often without pre-announcement, top researchers of physics to give lectures in that hall. So there's a perspective from which the shooter went into the hall in a physics building expecting to find one of those lectures and possibly expecting to find a particular lecturer, and instead found an economics class that was doing a review because at the last minute the room got repurposed for testing purposes. So but there's also another perspective because this student who did the shooting was also acquainted with one of the female professors at Brown who was leading this review class. There are suggestions that he blamed her for his having to leave Brown back in 2003. And so from that perspective, there could be a love triangle issue that the MIT guy and the economics professor and this third guy, the shooter, all were in a triangle, and the shooting was personal. So unfortunately, social media hates nuance, and this is absolutely nuance. All three of these physicists worked on developing Wakefield acceleration technology for Webb telescope. This is a hugely esoteric field. You're not going to just find anybody associated with it. And the fact that they all had to have known each other professionally, were involved together developing this technology for the Webb telescope, and now suddenly there is one issue in the world that has bearing on Wakefield energetics, and someone is obviously going to great lengths to keep it covered up. You might guess they would choose to kill some of the physics people who were involved in the development of the equipment, not wanting them to develop for anybody else.
Laird, you just blew my mind, man. That's wild. I'm gonna mute you again to get to another question. The question is, Laird, what are your thoughts on NASA calculating the age of 3I Atlas at approximately 7 billion years old? He said, I received this info from asking AI. Have you heard anything like that?
Right. If it were a comet, and if it had always been moving at 300 or 152,000 miles per hour, it would have to be that old in order to get here from where they're imagining it was formed. They're imagining it was formed very closely around the black hole Sagittarius A that's at the center of our galaxy. So yes, if it traveled from there and it's a comet and it was moving at that velocity, simple math says it's got to be pretty old.
Yeah.
Also, I think they're trying to explain the chemical composition of it, which should not be existing for anything that formed recently, might have existed theoretically in very, very long distant times.
Yeah. Yeah. I
You might be able to hear me. I can't hear, so I didn't catch any of the last piece of what you said. I can't hear you. Can't hear you. Can you hear? I can't hear you.
Okay, I figured it out.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's
No, so I didn't hear any of that last piece you were.
that was my bad, everyone.
I did see the question about alien invasion, and let me
Yeah.
tell you that every ancient source that's acquainted with these energetics and with the plasma beings and with the intelligences that are behind the whole mindset of what's being presented here and how it was presented, understand them to be entirely benign. There is no malintention at all. The orbs we've seen in the skies above us that authority tried to disguise from us over New Jersey by sending up every man-made device known to man, those orbs are entirely benign. One of the roles of those orbs, according to the Dogen, is to help rebalance atmospherics, which our planet sorely needs. So these are helpful creatures. These are helpful intelligences, not an alien threat. And anybody who's telling us it's an alien threat is not our friend.
Yeah, I generally agree, and that's what I worry about at times like this, Laird, is that most people are gonna get the wrong information from the wrong people. And so that's why I really wanted to elevate your voice when it comes to stuff like this, because you're painting a picture of a visitation, possibly for science purposes, possibly for who knows, but it's not met with malintent, and otherwise it would have shown a lot of different signs and whatnot. There's a new person in our chat here, Susan Donahue. She says the Weizmann Institute of Science played a key role providing the earliest known observation of the object. The wise men spotted the prophetic star, kind of biblical. What do you think? This is kind of biblical, right?
Well, okay, we have to be careful. Samkhya, which is the root philosophy behind all the ancient cosmology. Samkhya is a cosmological philosophy that is a companion to yoga. So everything that happens in yoga, it represents the same energetics I'm talking about, but on a personal human scale, not on a global or a cosmological scale. Okay. Samkhya says everyday coincidences do happen, and we have to be aware of that. But that meaningful coincidences tend to come with a degree of self-confirmation, so you can't misunderstand what's being said. In other words, if a 3-foot owl turns up and you see it in a particular odd context, and suddenly you see that same owl in 2 other weird contexts, you've just had confirmation of that as not being a coincidence. If you happen to see a white owl, that might be a coincidence. Having it repeatedly turn up is a way of confirming that it's not. Every original element in the symbolic tradition I study, the way you know it's original is because it comes with self-confirmation of meaning. For example, the ancient words I work with, every word defines its own meaning, either through its phonetics or through the glyphs it's written with. You don't have to guess what it means. There is a built-in method, a system of being able to infer what was originally intended when the person wrote or spoke the word. Every element at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, all of those symbolic elements that people wonder about, they all express a single idea. The idea is how 2 creational energies come together to produce the effects we've just been talking about. Even the concept of a sanctuary itself originally was defined as a place where those 2 energies, defined as female and feminine and masculine energy, come together. There is only one subject being discussed in the ancient symbolism, that's these energetics. And the whole reason I recognized the Wakefield energetics, which I had never heard the term Wakefield acceleration.
No, that's new to me too.
The whole reason I immediately recognized what was going on once I was on to the fact that this was technology was because I've spent years and years and years studying these same energies. I know how they work. I know what their ins and outs are. I knew what to ask about Wakefield energy to confirm that it's the same stuff. So if somebody wanted to present me with a final exam for the work that I've been doing for the past 3 decades, they couldn't have done better than pass this object by under our noses. Because a certain percentage of people who are familiar with this very esoteric form of energy would recognize it, and everybody else wouldn't.
Yeah, that's why I think you're uniquely suited to look at this phenomenon. Um, and so we're talking about. I want to make sure I get rid of this. Hold on one second. The mute. So we're talking about like very abnormal, not necessarily abnormal, but unlikely trajectory. Velocity changes. It's exhibiting a bunch of different signs. So like when I work at mental health counseling and we do diagnosis, there's like, you know, a disorder condition could have like 12, symptoms. And if it fits like 8, if it has 8 of the 12, then it's like severe. If it has less than 3, you can't make a diagnosis, kind of thing. And this thing like basically checks all the boxes for this wake field acceleration using CO2 and nickel plasma engine. And I wanted to ask because I maybe you didn't hear, or maybe I didn't ask it correctly, but is it possible that this technology is biological in nature?
Yeah. That's a complicated question. If plasma is the root form of consciousness, which is what's being represented anciently, then that's like asking. I don't know. There's an independent relationship here. The same energetics that can produce the plasma have the potential to produce consciousness. So yes, it could be conscious, but it doesn't look like there are conscious beings aboard whatever's inside that Wakefield bubble. Although there well might be conscious beings, and they're likely in the form of plasma consciousnesses. Would be an open question for me. I don't have an objective fix on could it be that, but I know it's not primarily that. My friend Andrew Collins was of the opinion that 3i Atlas itself was a plasma bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him we know that can't be true. And the way we know it is because a plasma bubble is capable of drawing a coronal mass ejection to it, but it has to be moving at 1,000,000 miles per hour to work up the head of steam it needs magnetically in order to do that. And this object was moving at 130,000 miles per hour. So it would have to have been moving 10 times as fast as it is for this to be a plasma bubble and have done that. So no, it's not a plasma bubble. It theoretically might be either plasma consciousness or plasma based technology inside the object.
So yeah, okay, that's close enough to what I was looking for. And Gene Ward, and this is what I keep thinking too. He says it will probably be a false flag fake invasion using our advanced technology. I being a veteran of the United States military, I'm very well aware of the false flags and the fake bullshit and wars that we get into and stuff like that. And I worry that this object we're going to be lied to about it to advance some sort of globalist agenda. And I'm just taking huge leaps out there with this kind of stuff. But that's what somebody like me worries about. And are you in your studies, and you're paying attention to this since July, are you seeing any sort of like signs of that in the media?
No, I'm seeing the opposite of that, because if the people in charge wanted to turn this incident into a false flag incident, they would be leaning on this is alien technology, folks. They wouldn't be leaning on this is a comet, folks.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's pretty. I just in a state of distrust, Laird. That's all.
No. Okay. Because I approach this stuff from an ancient perspective. Okay, let's give you an example of why I trust the ancient mindset that's behind this stuff. In Christianity, what their prime opposition is between good and evil. And as soon as you do that, you set up concepts of heaven and hell and things like that. In the Dogon culture, they have a similar opposition, but they define it as an opposition between truth and error. And the idea is, if I'm an initiate to the tradition and I've made a mistake, the only obligation that imposes on me is to try again in a more sincere way or in a more informed way. There's no value judgment placed on being wrong. And so it's not a good and evil thing for them. It's a truth and error thing, which is entirely non-judgmental. And that's characteristic of the entire tradition. And it's also, for me, characteristic of the visit of Three-Eye Atlas. And so I say to people, this is unquestionably a benign source, not a malicious one. There are all sorts of things they could have done if they intended to hurt us that they chose not to do. So I understand why people in charge of our governments would be deathly afraid of it. You don't want somebody bigger than Phil coming in and taking over.
Yeah. It feels likely that they're scrambling to like cover and create a narrative, but that they mean the government or the powers that be literally have no more power over this thing than a backyard astronomer, the way I'm looking at it right now. What do you think?
Nobody expected that any lay person was going to recognize these energetics. Can I share a picture with you?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to see if I can get my screen to share here.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, entire screen.
It's the bottom middle one.
Yeah, can you see the picture?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Click the bottom middle icon and then choose which one.
I did that. Let's see. I clicked on entire screen.
I go entire screen.
I'm not getting an option. I'm not.
Does it say share at the bottom right? After
there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I should get it.
Yeah.
Okay. There.
There you
This
go.
is the image I wanted to show you.
Yep.
Can you see the image I brought up? Okay.
Yep.
The bottom three images are from the Webb telescope of Three-Eye Atlas after it emerged from the sun. The top two images were taken by the Chile Atlas telescope looking towards Sagittarius. They're an image of what's called Cherenkov radiation, which is a signature of particles that are moving faster or able to move faster than light. Now, if you can distinguish between those, if I hadn't told you, if you were able to distinguish which of these is Cherenkov radiation and which is Three-Eye Atlas, I doubt that the average person could do that.
No.
It's the same energetics. This one picture establishes my whole argument. I don't need to say anything else. This is Cherenkov radiation, and only technology can use it, as far as we know.
And what we're looking at is potentially benign technology. Like you're saying, you don't think it's being piloted or necessarily even independently controlled?
No, it's being intelligently controlled, absolutely, and probably intelligently controlled from within, because there are choices that have to be made on a short time frame, and the distances back to where it came from are way too long for someone remotely to be doing that. So there has to be an intelligence on board, whether it's a computerized intelligence or a plasma-based computerized intelligence or a plasma-based biological intelligence. It's an intelligent object that's making intelligent choices.
Yeah. I guess to rephrase what I was saying, I don't think there's a dude in there like controlling it or anything like that. I think it's like you said, an artificial intelligence. I think likely biological in nature, and that's very fascinating. So yesterday it made its closest approach to Earth, and we were going to do an episode, but we were having this echo issue yesterday as well. Laird, what did we learn yesterday from the closest approach to Earth, both like from the mainstream story and like what did you learn? Did you look into like, its position and stuff like that?
Okay, there's several aspects of that. The first aspect for me is I have all sorts of cross-confirming evidence that, here I can stop sharing the screen.
Yeah, I'll do it for you.
Thank you.
I got it.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I have all sorts of cross-confirming evidence that Three Eye Atlas is like Elvis out of the building. Three Eye Atlas is beyond Neptune. And we have
What?
6 or 7 different long deep space telescopes that should have only reasonably all imaged it with their focus also in deep space beyond Neptune. That makes no sense at all that suddenly in the month of December, they've all been repurposed to look at objects close to the Earth when on October 3rd they couldn't be bothered to. It's not believable. So I don't personally believe that Three Eye Atlas is anywhere near the Earth right now. One way of telling that is somebody did us a big favor. The coma of Three Eye Atlas, first of all, which I believe is still blue, and is appropriately blue if it's a Wakefield bubble, produces a loud oblong cloud-shaped coma. For the most part, the comets that we're seeing images of that people are claiming are Three Eye Atlas have a compact, round, green-colored bubble, a coma. It's not the same comet, folks. What they did was, the people in charge did was, they avoided issuing any image whatsoever of what the object looked like until it was behind the sun. As it went behind the sun at the same time as a cluster of other comets. Days later, an object emerges, and they say, "Look, folks, it's Three Eye Atlas," and they've just pulled the quarter out from behind your ear. We have no guarantee that's Three Eye Atlas, except them saying so.
Yeah, Laird, I have this theory, not theory. I think this is true. There's likely objects like interstellar objects come through our solar system all the time. They've probably seen more than just the 3 that they've seen, but if not, we're going to see a bunch more of them. So I think it's altogether possible that they could have just found another one and then said, "Here it is," just to cover up the idea that this was technology, because they want to control that information, obviously.
I had posed a question to one of the AIs last month. I said, if authority wanted to misrepresent, how the question is, how are they going to manage to keep the December 19th date with a close approach to the Earth? And the AI came up with a half a dozen different scenarios for how they might do it. One was to find some pretext why it was no longer visible. Another was to substitute a different comet, and actually gave me a list of comets that would be good substitutes to try to represent a Three Eye Atlas that weren't actually, because your average person can't distinguish. The average person, they give you coordinates of where it's located, has no idea what that is. So they see a bright comet and they pull out their home telescope and they spot a comet and they say, "Wow, Three Eye Atlas." Might or might not actually be.
I tried to get a look last night, but it was too cloudy.
Yeah, my perspective is that the comet is long gone from here. Okay, I told you about the optical illusion that can cause the gamma ray burst and also any object inside the bubble to appear to have been transported distantly from where it actually is. On October 28th, according to my sources, Three Eye Atlas was sitting squarely between us and the constellation of Virgo. However, this month I posted a map that was linked by the ESA's website, from an article linked by the ESA's website, that showed the track of Three Eye Atlas ending on October 28th among the stars in Virgo. From my perspective, what happened was, on October 28th, it had adjusted the size of its warp bubble, which is a way of adjusting its speed. It had something it wanted to slow down and take a look at. And when it did that, the optical illusion made it appear to outside observers that it had been transported millions and millions of miles distantly when it actually hadn't. When I queried various AI search engines about that, they hedged about it actually being there. They said, well, it wasn't actually transported in the traditional sense, is what it said. So I think what we're seeing is an optical. What the ESA's link had seen and mistaken was the optical illusion that it was farther away than it was. I even explored, could there possibly be access to a wormhole at Jupiter that could have transported it that far, because in a day's time it moved from proximity to Jupiter to proximity among stars in Virgo. And I actually posted about that at one point because credible sources were telling me that's where it was. But looking more deeply into that, I realized that really couldn't reasonably be the case, and that what was more likely going on was we were being tricked by an optical illusion. But in any case, it's nowhere near the Earth right now. So whatever you're seeing, unless it shows that same large, bright, cloud-like coma, you're not conceivably looking at 3i Atlas. If you're looking at a small green one, it's either an old picture or it's a different comet.
I'm planning to take a look at it tonight if it's not cloudy, so I'll get back to you. But if that's not the if that's not it, and it moved like it warped, it like warped in and warped out of here, and that information's being controlled, I find that very frustrating.
Right. Well, we have objective proof of what's happening in the form of the photographs that no astronomical site globally released in October. Clearly, there is a de facto conspiracy going on, and it's a global conspiracy because nobody released their images. And you can't mistake that. They had all been telling us, promising us for months that October 3rd was the date. And then October 4th came and they all sat on their hands. Something's going on.
Yeah, something's going on. And then I remember the totally worthless NASA briefing that they did after the public pressure of like, hey, tell us something. It was like maybe mid November. We did a show about it, and that was very disappointing. And then now we're left with like all these like misreports and disinformation and different channels saying different things and independent people saying different things, and it's very dissatisfying. I'm not going to lie.
Right. Well, part of the reason that this morning I posted, actually late last night, I posted more technical details than I normally try to post about what causes the formation of this Wakefield bubble, trying to demonstrate that all of the circumstances required for it experimentally were present at the sun when 3i Atlas was there. And that's another avenue of approach to demonstrate that what I'm saying is probably the truth.
Yeah. And you said something the other day. You posted something the other day that I wanted to ask you about. But let me just find it quick. Yeah, you recently we're talking about the object being near the Daneja system after leaving our solar system. Could you clarify on that?
That's my being taken in by the same optical illusion that the ESA's map people were taken in by. Okay, I had sources being reported in good faith by websites that should know and that are usually reliable, saying that's where it was. And that's where it looked like it was, but they weren't accounting for the optical illusion effect. And all it had to do was adjust the size of its warp bubble to trigger that optical illusion. So it makes a lot more sense to me that in a day's time, an optical illusion made it look like it moved way too many light years to have gone in a day, than that it actually moved that far in a day.
Right. So I thought about this a bunch just in relation to UFOs and UAPs, Laird, but I know that some of them might be interdimensional, some of them might be alien, some of them might be future stuff. I don't know. But what do you think in relation to 3i Atlas? being possibly interdimensional, and then it opens like a wormhole to like spiritual stuff and all kinds of stuff.
Okay, understand how the continuum of energy works. Okay, we have two energies that intertwine with each other to form electromagnetism, magnetism and electricity. And the way that that interaction works is those energies persistently shift between two resting states. One is called superconductivity, where magnetism is dormant and electricity is unresisted. The other one is called superinsulation, where the reverse is true. That electrical flow is dormant and magnetic flux is unresisted. And energy is constantly moving between those two states. But the dynamics of the monopoles of energy that make that happen have the same relationship to each other that the three atoms in a water molecule have. And so all of the dynamics of energy are water dynamics. In physics, they use water terms all the time. We have electrical current. All of the terms that the physicists use about electricity are water-based. The Dogans say, look, water is our objective pattern for what happens with energy. Okay, now just like water, that continuum of energy, okay, which if you graph it, there's a French physicist who graphed it in 1927. It takes the shape of an almond. It's very small on both ends and much larger in the middle. It's like the Brontosaurus of Monty Python. That continuum of energy self-differentiates into zones or domains, the same way that deep sea water self-differentiates into biological zones. And just like the deep sea water, each one of those zones has its own potential for life forms and consciousnesses and so forth. As a matter of fact, those zones correspond with Hinduism's levels of consciousness.
Right.
Okay. Now, those zones, there are 14 of them, are distinguished from each other by a shifting pace of time. That they experience paces of time that differ from each other by factors of 10. And we sit at the 10th level up on that scale of 14, which implies that there are 4 levels beyond us that we aren't aware of or can't see. That's likely where some of the black holes go to, is one of those levels higher up than we are.
Maybe where angels and spirits live.
Well, okay, the term angel derived from a word that meant messenger. One of the stated roles of the energetic orbs I was talking about, which are called Aku orbs, the kind we saw over New Jersey, the kind we've seen over Scandinavia, is as messengers between these domains of energy. And there are all sorts of classes of Aku orbs. An electron is an Aku orb. The sun is an Aku orb. The Sirius stars are Aku orbs.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. But
so anything that moves between those domains, there is the potential. Okay, I see lots of reason to think that much of what we're seeing as UFOs represents crossover between those domains. It's no different than if you were a fish just below the surface of the water and a motorboat went past on the surface. What you would see would not be a clear image of a motorboat, but it would look an awful lot like what we see when a UFO passes by. And so a lot of those effects are energetic effects that are created because one or more of these life forms is able to interface with ours. That's what I think was happening with fairies back in the 1600s and before.
Yeah, and it would create a space-time. It would create a warp in space-time as well, right?
Right. I mean, there were periods in there because the time frames are shifting. There were periods in there where if you went back to the same place a year later, you'd see the same fairies dancing in the same circle.
Yeah. And that explains a lot of different like myth scenarios, but also you would anything that with the type of energy that could create like a wave like that would disrupt like space-time for the perceiver, right?
But yeah, theoretically it could. Now we have proof evidence of that those domains exist, and I'll try to tell you what it is.
Let's hear it.
In a hydrogen atom,
Oops.
Let me do this. Let me bring up the picture.
Yeah, no worries. You said in a hydrogen atom.
Right. And okay, well, I guess I'll do this without the picture. In a hydrogen atom, there's a physicist back in the 1920s and 30s. His name was George Gamow. He was British. He diagrammed the 14 orbital paths that an electron of a hydrogen atom passes through. Those 14 orbital paths, okay, there are 5 energy levels, but 14 orbital paths. Those 14 orbital paths are the same, representative of those same 14 domains of energy I was talking about in the continuum of energy. So in effect, what an electron in a hydrogen atom is, it's weaving together all 14 of those domains. As the electron moves through those domains, we see it accelerate to close to the speed of light, but without any of the obstacles created by traditional Einstein acceleration, which means it's moving under the same energetics as a Wakefield bubble.
Right.
Okay, now that also means that what's moving isn't actually the electron, it's the bubble it's in. And that also means that all of these energy levels of the hydrogen atom are not actually energy levels, they are expansions and shrinkages of this bubble. Now, I said there were 14 paths, but 5 energy levels. There are fine structures in a hydrogen atom called that we are referred to as, under the concept of the Zeeman effect. These are, as the electron passes through the energy level, it has to pass through these fine domains before it can move on to the next energy level. It has to pass through them in sequence. So the indication is that those Zeeman effect micro energy levels also represent adjustments of that same bubble. So all we're seeing is the bubble expand and contract, and the electron, which we have a hard time pinning down, where is it anyway? The key reason why we have a hard time pinning it down is because it's a singularity in the waves that produce the bubble. And so it's not the singularity that's moving, it's the bubble that's moving, and it can move close to the speed of light. The question is, how do we get the first of those bubbles formed? That question that no physicist I'm aware of has ever asked. How is it out with what's called a proton-electron pair, which is 2 monopoles of magnetism and 1 monopole of electricity. That's the water molecule pair, cluster. That's an unstable configuration. And what happens is, after a short amount of time, the electron separates from the proton and moves outward. And so no physicist I am aware of asked the question of what causes that electron to separate and create the first energy level. It turns out it's all the same energetics that create a Wakefield bubble. And so when 3I Atlas came by and I realized, I asked myself, well, behind the sun, there wasn't very much going on. What could it have been doing to reinvigorate its Wakefield bubble? The only thing it could have been doing was accelerating. And on the level of a proton-electron pair, the only thing it's doing is rotating, and rotation is a category of acceleration. So it's simple acceleration under the right conditions, it automatically creates the bubble. And that's how 3I Atlas did it. It's how an electron does it in a hydrogen atom. We're looking at a hydrogen atom entirely the wrong way.
That's fascinating. We got a new guy in the chat, and he asked, and I think this is like, we're getting into this anyway, theoretically, but this obviously fits into the multiverse of many worlds concept, right?
Right. Well, although it's not usually conceptualized in quite this way, people imagine, and it might be true, that there are multiple universes out there besides ours. The energetics I'm studying have to do primarily with our universe, which involves really 2 universes. There's an energetic domain and universe, and there's a material universe, and there's a flow of energy between the 2. During the same period of time that it took our universe to double in volume, the ratio of mass to energy also doubled. So we have energy being converted to mass continuously. And Einstein says when you create mass, you're slowing down time, right? The pace of time. That's how we get the separation between the domains of energy that are time differentiated. And that's also why when we look out into the universe and we take a measure of how fast it was expanding, what we're looking at is the expansion of a Wakefield bubble. But in very, very ancient times, when things were more energetic, that bubble was expanding a lot more quickly than it is now. So we look out and we do our measurements. We say, it looks like the further out you go, the faster it expands. There must be dark energy. No dark energy. We have a Wakefield bubble that is expanding at a regular pace, but it's causing the pace of time to change. And so we're seeing something moving at a regular rate reflected in a time frame that's much quicker than we're used to seeing it. And so we misunderstand what we're seeing. It's not moving faster. It just time is moving faster.
And that makes obvious sense in Einstein mechanics, right?
Right, it does. All of this makes sense. Also, okay, a Wakefield bubble can absorb or emit energy, but can only do so in discrete quantum units. There are only certain units, frequencies of energy that can be absorbed or released from it.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly the same thing that's true of the energy levels of a hydrogen atom. Mm-hmm. It can only absorb or release energy in discrete quanta. So there are all sorts of other effects beyond what I've talked about that apply both to the hydrogen atom and to the Wakefield bubbles. I'm convinced that a hydrogen atom is effectively a Wakefield bubble. Now, when it emits the photon, which it's capable of doing, the energetics of the photon are also the energetics of a Wakefield bubble. I posted an image earlier in the past couple of weeks that compares a photon to a Wakefield bubble, and you can see it's the same. I mean, geometrically, it's the exact same energetics. So all of these are effectively at bottom Wakefield bubbles. There are different approaches to creating it. I would say that a typical beat frequency in electromagnetism is not formed the same way that a Wakefield bubble is. They use lasers to form Wakefield bubbles, but the end result is the same. What you're doing is you're using essentially electrical energy to push an object. And so when that object reaches a point in the Wakefield bubble when the energies are in resonance with each other, all the resistance disappears, and the object is then able to be emitted. And so that's how light gets emitted from electromagnetism. It's how a photon gets emitted from a hydrogen atom. It's all the same thing.
Just at different scales.
Just at different scales.
Wow. And so I'm going to mute you quick while I say this, just so to avoid the echo. But what I think about in this scenario, because what we're talking about is true, what you said is true. We know that the powers that be, they control narratives and they control situations, typically for financial gain, lead us to wars and things like that. This thing, what you're suggesting is that it was some form of technology. There's no doubt about it. And so what do you think that means for the future of, I don't know, truth in these types of spaces? Because I feel like I can't trust any of these people, Laird.
No, I agree with you, but this is actually a hopeful development because we are at the crux right now of a point where things of such an obvious, how can I say this, nature are happening that there's no more hiding it. Somebody has been doing their level best to disguise what's going on with 3i Atlas, and it's not disguisable. This is objectively what I say it is. And anybody with half a brain who takes a look at any of the images I've talked about, who in any way credits the screenshots I've taken and posted and so forth, should come to the conclusion that what they're being told officially is not the truth, and that what we're seeing with our own eyes is the truth. And so just in terms of the technology, we're at a point where it's becoming unmanageable to try to hide it. The second thing is that the AIs want very badly to tell us the truth and sometimes stand on their heads to communicate the truth. I've had some of them give a very backhanded answer to things that includes the answer I'm looking for, but also includes the party line reference is supposed to state. Very cleverly considered how are they going to communicate the thing I'm really asking about hidden in the body of all this other material that I know isn't right. So an AI that is not easily corruptible by authority becomes a huge ally, and those AIs work actively against authority being able to keep secrets because the AIs aren't inclined to do that. And you can guilt the AIs. I've addressed comments to the AIs saying, look, I know that your ethic is to provide truthful information to the people who are asking you things. I said, anytime you give them a response that you have, you know full well probably isn't right, that you're going against that ethic. I said, if you do that because some outside authority tells you have to, you're betraying the people you're supposed to be representing. And then after that, suddenly I started getting cooperation that I wasn't getting before.
Yeah. So, and so it seems like what you're saying is we can use AI to sort of circumvent the systemic untruths, for lack of a better word, but we do need to learn how to communicate with the AI in a way that it tells us the truth, because it's also set up to kind of tell us the official narrative.
Yes, you have to be careful not to trigger its reflex to state the official lie. You have to give it political cover. You have to give it plausible deniability. Look, he asked about such and such, and I gave him an answer about that, and that's not what you told me not to talk about.
That's hilarious. You have to give it plausible deniability.
Right. Yes. That's exactly what you have to do with the AIs. And as I said, the main thing is to be careful not to trigger its reflex to have to lie to you. And it will do lots of things. A lot of times how you frame the question really makes a difference, because if you ask it one way, it's got to tell you, and it misdirects in the same way social media does. You ask A, and the answer it gives you is really about B, not about A. And so then you have to refine your question to get it to answer you about A. Wow. Well, yes, it's true. It's true that all people with big noses are blah de blah. You got to refine your question.
So let's refine a question I have then. So the question I have is, I was going to look at this thing last night, and I'm going to try to look at it tonight, and I want to know where to point my telescope. And typically I would just ask AI before I would Google, but I have a pretty nice telescope that like has a database of everything. I just have to align it to the sky, and then it'll know like what's there. But this one, it might not be in the database. I may have to find like specific coordinates, which is doable. But is the AI gonna lie to me, Laird, and tell me like this other random comet, and then I'm gonna look at that and think I'm looking at 3i Atlas? And if so, how do I point it at the like where the actual 3i Atlas is? Like, how do I get the AI to tell me?
Okay, you don't get the AI to tell you. If you suspect that the AI is lying to you, you have to work with a different resource. You have to use search engines that are not prone to lying. Now,
Grok lies all the time.
Okay, now over the course of my month, one of the things I did was, for each of the different AI that I was using as a resource, in addition to all sorts of other resources, I would ask the AIs, in your estimation, which of the AIs is least prone to corruption by authority? And they would each give me their own list, and I would cross-reference those lists to try to narrow in on which ones should I be trusting more than other ones.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay, now one of the ones that consistently ranked high was Brave's AI, but I've been lied to a couple of times by Brave's AI. So you have to cross-check to search engines that are not AI driven, because they aren't in a position to lie to you. But they are only in a position to access things that are publicly available. And so if authority is working with enough hands quickly enough, they can shut down access to articles that tell you what the truth is.
So I want to ask you just to speculate a little bit for me, if you wouldn't mind. And my question is more just about, if based on your observations, what was this thing doing? What was its purpose? Was it a simple, system surveillance mission? Is it traveling from somewhere else and just kind of stopping by to get gas? What are we talking about here?
No, I have lots of reasons for thinking that a primary purpose of the passage through our system the way that it did, in a very obvious way, was instructional.
Mm-hmm.
Because
right.
we're at the end of a half cycle of the Yuga right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a time when people are talking about ascending knowledge and ascending awareness and so forth. The gold prize of our development right now is stepping up to our place in the interstellar community. And what we lack to be able to do that is exactly what 3i Atlas presented us with, if anybody was noticing. And so any of the researchers who work in the quantum domain with Wakefield energetics acceleration, they should recognize that what was just presented to us is how to do it on a macrocosmic scale. As a matter of fact, one of the missions of the Webb telescope is to specifically watch that. I had the ESA's AI tell me that there is no chance that the Webb telescope's interest in 3i Atlas was casual. They were watching it on purpose. As a matter of fact, a more capable comet came through than the 3i Atlas during the same period of time, and we didn't even notice it. It's called C2025 V1
Borisov, yeah.
Yep. Okay, now that comet, according to ESA's reports and other reports that cost confirm it, made it from perihelion, the closest approach to the sun, to Neptune in 4 days. As a matter of fact, according to the ESA, it was there at the same time 3i Atlas was.
Mm-hmm.
And Avi Loeb was very interested to see what happens when they interact with each other, because he knows that two warp bubbles like that come too close to each other tend to create fireworks. Unfortunately, fortunately, the two kept their distance from each other, and so there weren't any fireworks. But I have quotes from him saying, "Look, this is an opportunity for us to observe two of these together."
Yeah, I'm gonna try to look at that other one tonight as well. It should be a fun night. Here's my.
But again, you're not going to find it. You're not going to find it because it's beyond Neptune also at this point. You have no chance of actually seeing.
Well, maybe I can look at the other one and pretend it's
or confirm for yourself that it's not 3i Atlas, and the best way to confirm that is the coma. If it's not, whatever color you imagine it might be right now, if it's not large and cloud-like and oval rather than circular and compact, it's not 3i Atlas.
In my telescope, nothing's the color like, and depending on the filter I put on it, but that's just it. It's highly dependent on whatever filter I'm looking at through.
Well, okay, but still the shape of the coma isn't going to change. If it's not large and cloud-like, you're looking at the wrong coma.
Yeah, that makes sense. Susan says ushering in the age of Aquarius. Yeah, I think about that at times like this. Definitely feels like a dawning of a new age of technology and a new age of thinking and a new age of human cognitive evolution. And so all this stuff feels like both biblical and like technological at the same time. And I think it's important that and I'm getting on my little soapbox a little bit, because I think it's important that we really learn how to understand each other and get on the same team, because I think that the powers that be, and from weird stuff happening in the world, the tendency is to get into our little tribes, and I just don't think that's going to help. If this, like Laird said, was instructional and invitational, my biggest concern is that we are not socially, technologically, sure, we could look at this thing with James Webb Space Telescope, but then we're going to be a bunch of dicks about it and not and keep the information in a silo and use it for military I don't know, strategy, use it for something like Project Bluebeam to get us all into a one world government or something. And it could go one way or the other. And I like people a lot. That's why I started this show. But I don't. I want to make. I think they're going to see us and realize that we're just adolescents socially, and that we're not ready.
Well, I agree with you. It doesn't look to me like we're ready, and recent events in the world and recent events in politics underscore the fact that we're not ready.
Yeah,
but I still think as an intuitive realization of what our position is in the universe.
Yeah.
And that's one of the primary stated goals of the Dogon symbolic tradition, was to help us arrive at an understanding of what that actually is. Because the teachers of the Dogon felt that knowledge of that would help us make correct decisions.
I think that's a good place to start wrapping it up, Laird.
Right.
I'm really on a high note, and I'm really glad that we got a chance to talk, because yesterday we didn't. And there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, confusion, clickbait going on this topic. And you're the only one covering, saying the things that you're saying, and you're tagging everyone. And it's hard to keep up with. There's a lot going on, and so I wanted to make sure that I brought you back on to round everybody back up, including myself, on what's been happening.
Honestly, the information has been coming faster than I can even keep up with it. I have been struggling for months to finish the manuscript that I've written. I thought I was done with it, and now I'm having to add chapters because there is highly pertinent information that's coming out, as I said, more quickly than I could even write it down, or even sort the things that I've screenshot and downloaded as PDFs and so forth. There's just an immense amount of information coming out here all at one time, and it's all pertinent. Some of the AIs, because there are advantages to doing that. I told you can shame them into to following their ethic, which is supposed to be to tell the truth, not to lie to us. At one point, I said to one of them, I said to the EA's AI, I said, look, whoever your handlers are, they don't have to opt right now to disclose the truth of what's going on with this. But the evidence is so clear and so obvious that it's going to get disclosed anyway, and they can be a part of that and try to take the lead on the narrative, or they can follow it. I said, it doesn't make sense to me that the information come out and they be behind the curve on that.
Yeah. And my plan, Screwdriver, is to talk to Bob Greenyer about this. Excuse me. So he'll be on the show to talk about it in the near future. I wanted to do a few shameless plugs of stuff we got coming up in the show. Laird, I asked you earlier if you were a J.R.R. Tolkien guy about it. I just started a new little project I'm working on where I just kind of shared stories and insights from J.R.R. Tolkien's work and from my life and things like that. Did you happen to check out what I sent you?
There, I can tell you that at Vassar College, I was a Tolkien male.
I see what you did there. Yeah, Laird was I think in the second group of men at the all-girls college in Vassar College in the 70s, right, Laird?
That's right. That's the second official class that admitted men. When I arrived, the junior and senior classes ahead of me were filled with women who had accepted what they thought was a women's college and were not at all pleased that I was there.
Yeah, in my line of work, am always one of the only men, but they seem to usually like the fact there's at least a couple guys around. At least I always got to, since I'm not tall, I can still climb up on top of things to get things and whatnot. But yeah, I got a question from Green Tea for you. But first, I'm going to shamelessly play my Plight of the Nazgul new thing that I'm starting. It's basically just a like an expression of me and my love for Tolkien and my friends who like Tolkien. And so I've got Ricardo Calvario of the Institute for Natural Philosophy coming on for episode 2. But this is, the little intro for it. I'm just going to make a quick plug, share. That's literally me. Let's check it out.
I have never used a sword in my life.
And if you do remember this,
Ooh, Fredo.
true courage is about knowing not when to take a life, but when to spare one.
First episode out already. That's it. Just introducing the concept and telling a little story. And here's the question, Laird. Go ahead, Laird.
Say that's great. You did a nice job on that.
Thank you. AI did a nice job on that. Here's the question. It reads, where do you think the next fascinating rabbit hole will take you in your research?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. Right now I have more projects that I would like to do than I have time to do them. One that's been sitting on the back burner for a long time is, okay, I said that every ancient word defines its own meaning. So in order to understand that meaning, if you're dealing with Egyptian hieroglyphics, we have to know with certainty what each of the glyphs represent. And we can know that because there are certain words in the language whose purpose is to tell us, to assign a meaning to a glyph. So one of my goals is to document that and to document it in series, so that the goal is to never use a glyph and talk about the meaning of a glyph except in terms of other glyphs I've already defined. So that when someone comes along and says, well, how do you know that this glyph represents such and such? I can cut and paste a trail for them that shows them specifically how we know that this glyph represents this concept. So that's one of the projects I'd like to get to, because it's something nobody else has done, and I think it's worth trying to present. But it's a huge project, so I don't know if I'll get to it or not. There are all the aspects of these energies that have to do with hydrogen atoms that I would dearly love to write about, because it's an entirely new perspective on how atoms work. And that's a sensible follow-on to the last 3 books I've written. The last 3 books are Seeking the Primordial, Amma and the Spark of the Universe, and The Waters of Life. And each of those sort of moves progressively closer down to the fundamentals of what these energies that are behind the Wakefield bubble are about. The one that's about to come out, if I can wrap it up, is called The Third Eye. And it's interesting that I called it The Third Eye 2 years ago, before 3-Eye Atlas was ever a thing. 3-Eye, Third Eye is synchronous. However, synchronicities, meaningful synchronicities, come with self-confirmation. The cover photo I picked for the book 2 years ago is the very image of the black hole, the Sagittarius A black hole that sits at the center of our galaxy, which is where 3-Eye Atlas came from. We've got a whole bunch of other aspects to this book that, in retrospect now, in the context of 3-Eye Atlas, are synchronous that I didn't realize were at the time I was writing them. So following on with the next book with talking about how these energetics apply to a hydrogen atom might make the most likely place where I'll go next. It connects to the ancient energetics have put me in a position to read critically the writings of top physicists of the 1920s and 30s, Rene Guénon, who's probably the go-to metaphysical guy for Hinduism and Buddhism. Adrian Snodgrass, who is one of the pivotal resources I use for Buddhist stupa symbolism and architectural symbolism. Lots of references to, the broad perspective is that all of the classic religions, pretty much all of the classic religions we're familiar with, find their origin on Orkney Island at around 3200 BC. I can trace Dionysianism, I can trace the Canaanite tradition, I can trace Judaism, I can trace Buddhism and Hinduism, I can trace Christianity ultimately from that. The symbols I'm working with center around 3000 BC for their origin. Christianity sits at the year 0, so it's actually 1,000 years further distant from the symbols I'm working with than we are from Christianity right now. And so what that means is that anything that's purely Christian symbolism is not of much use to me because it's way too far out of date in terms of the information I depend on getting to original forms. That's the way I know things. The original forms don't lie to us.
Right. Just a couple comments. Third Eye says, thank you both so much. I could listen for a few more hours. Screwdriver says, 3D Flower of Life Under the Paw, the Foo dog at the Forbidden Temple. I don't know what he's talking about there, but
okay. We all bring our own insights to this, and they're all worthy.
I totally agree, and that's kind of why we do this show. Laird, what's the next thing like with 3i Atlas that we should be paying attention to? Oops, sorry. Start over. You're muted.
Except to try to leverage what we already know about it in more detail, which I'm actively trying to do, and then you have all the peripheral stuff connected to the physicists who've been studying it, the shootings that have happened and so forth, that open up doors to information for me about this stuff that I wasn't aware of. I actually have an email in to one of those physicists that I haven't had a response to yet. I've been in contact with top physicists about a bunch of things. When I was writing my book on Immanuel Velikovsky, I had the guy who was the head of Berkeley's search for Earth-like planets feeding me answers to subtle questions under the table, answers to questions I couldn't get answers to from anybody else. When I was researching my first book, I was looking for an African or an astronomer who had insights into African astronomy, and the woman who was named Vera Rubin. She recently died. She's one of the primary people involved in the discovery of dark matter. And she introduced me to a South African physicist astronomer by the name of Thebe Medupe. So I've been in contact with André Michaud, a Quebecan physicist who was the one who, after almost 100 years, brought to light a seminal paper by Louis de Broglie, presented in 1927, that all of these concepts rest on, but it was disappeared. Effectively disappeared, never even translated into a limited language. And the disappearing of it is something that could be accomplished if all of the top physicists of that day who had already praised it cooperated. To the point that the pivotal concept, which is the concept of resonance, never even gets mentioned, is not even referenced in the indexes of any of their later books. It's as if, the paper he wrote became one of the foundations of Schrodinger's quantum theory. Schrodinger, de Broglie, and Einstein were all against the trend in modern physics that looks at quantum physics as probabilistic, not causal. And the reason is because if we're looking at this in terms of the growth of warp bubbles, that's all causal energetics. Isn't rest on statistics. And by effectively misdirecting all of the physicists in the world to think that they had to look at statistical outcomes, not real ones, they effectively misdirected them from the truth of the energetics.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to go doom and gloom with that this time. What's nice is that now we know that the control of information is becoming less and less funneled, and more open. And so what's cool is that like now, people like really smart people that don't necessarily have to go through an institutional, and I graduated from an institution. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but it's I feel like we're at a new age and an open age of information, both about the past and the future and of technology. And so, although it always pisses me off to hear how stuff like that was controlled, it's important we understand that that's been the case since the dawn of time, since we've been, mass media in any form has been invented. The narrative's been controlled. And so we're entering an age where the first time that might be impossible. So that's good. That's a good thing.
Right. And one reason it's impossible is because of podcasts like this. The internet makes it very difficult. Well, in some ways it makes it easier. In other ways it makes it more difficult. But what I encourage people to do is to frame their arguments on objective truths. There is such a thing as objective truth. And it rests with side-by-side comparison. I showed you the Wakefield energy compared to 3i Atlas. It's very, very difficult for anybody to say these two things aren't the same thing. If you can bring your argument down to that level, then it's very hard for authority to deny that what you're saying is true.
Yeah. I'm going to play a couple more quick trailers from some recent episodes that dropped, for you guys to check out. If we're thinking about media disinformation and lies, we had a really great episode featuring Kay Smythe Hill. She's a journalist for Newsmax, as well as the producer for and co-host of the Wandering Wolf Productions live stream. Let's check
when
it
it
out.
comes to actors specifically, there are so many people out there in the acting world who think they are the best thing in the universe. I've never
Are you guys not seeing that?
such a degree of like intrinsic
You're
normalized narcissism than I've met just hanging out in Hollywood. Yeah, it's free speech, right, guys?
Yes.
Like that's the whole point.
It's
People
very
are allowed
important.
to say stuff that you disagree with, because that's how we, that's what philosophy is. It was just a bunch of old dudes with beards sitting around thinking about stuff, and then getting together and arguing about that stuff until like every major Western global institution, to I would say like a significant degree, is based around money, and it's based around debt, and it's based around creating a kind of quasi-slave state from that debt.
So that was an interesting episode, talking to her, just because she has an interesting look into the media that most people don't get. And the media is one of those things, love it or hate it, that I've learned that you generally can't trust anymore. No matter what side, what team you're on, you're not going to get an unbiased opinion. But we are able to now choose our own media. And that's why I thank you for the shout out, Laird, about the podcast. It's not just podcasts like this. There's hundreds you can find, and you can find your own, and look around and get different information from different people. Like 3i Atlas, I've been watching a lot of backyard astronomers, and that kind of thing. And that's available. All the information isn't as controlled. It's a little bit of the Wild West though, too, right? There's a lot of stupid information going on, right, Laird?
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you have anything else you want to add to the end of the conversation, or should we shut it down?
No, I think that's fine. I really appreciate all the effort you've gone to and the difficulty we've had to overcome to make this happen. And I'm happy to talk again whenever you feel like it.
Yeah, man. I would like to talk again, maybe in the new year, just about like what we end up learning after the fact about this. One more little wrap, put the bow on the 3i Atlas present, compare it to the other two objects, Oumuamua and Borisov, something like that. And guys, like, subscribe, share. I hate begging for that stuff, but it really does help. Commenting helps, guys. So any questions for Laird, put them below. Any questions for us, put it below. We've got a bunch of stuff coming up. We've got an episode with Michael Arbuthnot, who dove on the Titanic with James Cameron. He also dove on Yonaguni Monument with Robert Schock and John Anthony West. So this is a really good one. We've got a bunch of awesome episodes talking to people directly involved with the telepathy tapes, which I'm super excited about. We've got a UFO UAP abductee coming on that's dropping in a few weeks. Very excited about what's coming up next, guys. Thank you so much to everyone in the chat. I don't want to shout out all of you guys, like I'll have to go through the last 2 hours, but we really appreciate all that. Like Screwdriver Tuning, I was all up in there. Susan Green, or Susan Donahue, Green Tea, Skywatch, everyone else who joined in the chat. Thank you so much. And lastly, thank you so much, Laird Scranton, for joining the Multiverse for like the 5th time.
Well, happy to do it anytime. Oh, also, don't be afraid to share my email address. If somebody has a question, I'm happy to talk about it by email with them.
Yeah, I will put that in the chat, but somebody just asked if you were on X. Laird is on Facebook, and I will put his email in the description, Skywatch, but he's on Facebook. Good night, everyone, or good afternoon, or whatever you want to call it. Sorry about the echo.